Philosophical Mysticism, a spiritual handbook for mankind. Lesson 45, does God exist? Does God exist? Um, so, Dawkins famously in The Selfish Gene, he's going to say, God exists, if only in the form of a meme with high survival value or ineffective power in the environment provided by human culture. So for Dawkins, God is only a meme. I take it Dawkins and the meme theorists have got it wrong at each angle. The first is thinking that memes and ideas are the same. They're not. What we would call memes are physical copies, artifacts expressed in the world, whether in speech, print, image, statue, tool, whatever. Ideas, on the other hand, are non-physical. At least according to philosophical mysticism, ideas are going to be non-physical. The second is thinking that ideas are out there in the world, surfing the wave of culture. That's sort of the idea here. That's not true. They're not. Ideas are not out there surfing the wave of culture. Ideas live in the head. The third is thinking all ideas are the same. The fourth, that they lack power. But both of these are not true. There are ideas that are ancient, rising before the first hut, dance, spear, hymn. Ideas that have shaped the mind itself and extorted every measure over the human organism. There are these ancient, powerful ideas. They're not all the same, and it's not the case that they're impotent, as Dawkins says. God exists. It's not some triviality, as Dawkins would have you believe. He exists and is the most powerful idea there's ever been. God is real. It's actually quite easy to prove the existence of God. He's likely in your head right now, my guess, making you angry, hostile toward the sounds that you're hearing. Relax. If you're an atheist, God is in your head too. He just doesn't have control over you, which is a good thing. But as you seek out other sources of meaning, New Age, spiritual mumbo jumbo, he will begin to take control again, even if in subtle ways. So God is ancient. He's in our heads. He's part of consciousness itself. He's there. But again, to be clear, while God exists, he is only in your head. Oh, and in the heads of billions of other people, which is significant. So he's only in your head, but he's also in the heads of billions of people. God has no direct control over the external world, nor direct control over external things. God does have power, though, through people. Indirectly, God has external power because people have external power. This is important. So even though he's only in our head, he is going to have power because he has control over people, and people have external power. God also has knowledge, but only knowledge of your conscious self. He does not have knowledge of other people or knowledge outside of what you know. But he knows what you know. So he does have knowledge all the same. The kicker: God uses this knowledge in his power to manipulate you. God is a selfish idea, plain and simple. though a very powerful one that is very familiar with human psychology. So God's been manipulating us since the beginning of time. Because he sort of came into existence with consciousness. He sort of arrived around the same time as consciousness. So he's sort of embedded within consciousness itself. So he's been around. He's an ancient idea that's been around for a long time. All God cares about is his maximal propagation and continued conscious reinforcement in your head. So you better pray. Well, don't pray. Really important is we should not make Dawkins' mistake and hold God as innocuous. We should be God-fearing, mainly because God is out to control us. So it'd be a big mistake to think that God is harmless, like what Dawkins tries to do by reducing him to an impotent meme. That's not true. We should take God seriously. Because God is out to control us, and God is powerful and knows a lot about us. The practical necessity of Jesus of Nazareth. So God controls us through fear, that's sort of the saying, but he also controls us through love. So God is love, as the saying goes, or at least that's what people say. Well, not exactly. That's not true. It's extremely important to realize that God is only an idea. And ideas are emotionless. And I make this sort of case throughout these lessons, throughout my book. Ideas are emotionless. And this is the case even for the most powerful and oldest ideas. An idea is incapable of feeling anything, much less love or jealousy or anger, as is the case with the mosaic created around God in the Judeo-Christian tradition. And the necessity of Jesus of Nazareth points to this very fact. God needs to be recreated in the form of a mortal man actually capable of being kind and compassionate and loving and suffering. And Jesus does this. At least the conception of Jesus does this. And the huge success of Christianity depends on this recreation and adjustment. It's actually interesting. So if you're a theist, it's actually interesting if you ever wondered, why God becomes a lot less emotional by the time we make it to the New Testament. Well, the reason this is the case is because God doesn't have to be emotional anymore. Jesus does all the emotional work for him. So that's sort of what's going on here. The divine status of Jesus, I'm not going to really get into that. I'm not going to debate that. I'm going to leave that alone. Though it's very likely, I think, that Jesus was a good and virtuous person. He probably was a very virtuous person. A philosopher, maybe, even. But if you follow my arguments that I'm giving, it should be very clear that Jesus is not God in any way. Jesus is not God. Because God is an idea and Jesus was a human, so they're not the same thing. Though if God is an idea, if this is true that God is an idea, well, he did in fact use Jesus as his messenger. Jesus does act as a representative of God in human flesh. As his representative, at least, spreading the message, eventually leading to the conversion of billions of people to the idea. So he's a very, very effective messenger. Even if he's just a human, whatever, he was a very effective messenger, and his message led to the conversion of billions of people. So that was pretty good. So he might as well have just been God's actual heir, even if not God himself. So he might as well have been his heir, considering he does such an effective job, for whatever reason, of spreading God's message, or at least getting God into people's heads. Though I suspect God likely used many others before Jesus in the same way. So I suspect God likely used many, many other people besides Jesus, sort of sacrificing them using them before he got it right. So Jesus probably wasn't the first. Many more were sacrificed before Jesus, before God got it right. And it's really unfortunate that Jesus had to suffer one of the worst deaths imaginable. Being crucified is one of the worst deaths you could possibly have. Unimaginable suffering. So he had to do this for God or something that never really cared about him. So he did all this he suffered so much for a God that didn't really care about him. He was a mere sacrifice. That's all he was in God's eyes. A sacrificial animal. And that's really, that's a shame. It's unfortunate. Escaping God. In philosophical mysticism, escaping God is required for spiritual growth. Once we see God for what he really is, a manipulative idea, we could start the process of freeing ourselves. So once we sort of recognize what God really is, we could sort of start this process of freeing ourselves from God. And it's actually easier for theists, I think, to complete the process because they genuinely know what they're escaping from. Whereas atheists and agnostics are oblivious. They tend to be oblivious. And the atheist mistake is thinking that just choosing not to believe in God or some God or gods is enough. They think that's enough to escape. Well, it's not that easy. Again, God is embedded into the structure of consciousness itself. He is the onus eternus. And it's extremely difficult to escape religious thinking in its entirety. So it's not just about escaping one belief. You got to escape all manipulative beliefs that you might have or ideas that you might have. But we have to do this. We need to do this to grow, and we need to do this in order to own ourselves. Another thing, atheists and theists also usually fail to realize that God is a shapeshifter. God took the form of fire and animals because that was what was around and useful to hunter-gatherers at the time. He took the form of multiple human-like immortals because it was easier for humans to make sense of at the time, whether, ancient Greeks or whatever. He took the form of wise old man and father because it conveniently mimics archetypes already in our brain. So he's going to sort of mimic the archetypes to sort of get some type of effect out of us. He's going to manipulate us that way by mimicking the archetypes, pretending to sort of act to be those archetypes. In the form of light, when people talk about God, they always talk about like light now instead of some old man in the sky, old father or wise old man in the sky. But even the form of light is just another archetype mimic. It exploits the archetype of light to sort of get an effect out of us, a reverence out of us. So it's just another archetype mimic. Important too, I should point out, it's useless for spiritual growth if you just replace the image of God with something else to control you in its place. So again, escaping God's not enough. You got to go all the way. If you should replace something else to take God's place, it's pretty useless. Whether it be an ideology or social cause or political party or culture or object worship, doesn't matter. All of these things are bad. All of these things can manipulate you. So just filling the void is just as bad as believing in God. God takes many forms. Use whatever one works best to manipulate you. So be wary here. Just because it doesn't look like some type of traditional image of God that you've heard of in religious contexts, God doesn't have to take that form. God can take any form he wants. So be on high alert here. neither atheism nor theism. So to be very blunt here, God didn't love Jesus. He didn't. It's a fact, because God's an idea and ideas are emotionless. And God doesn't love you. He just isn't capable of it. I mean, that's just the way it is. He's just, as an idea, God's not capable of loving you. And to think so is lying to ourselves. The thing we call God, or have called God for thousands of years, is an imposter. Pretending to be what he's not, telling us what we want to hear, promising us the world. Even an extra world after we die. And God will tell us whatever works, whatever gets us to put him in our heads and consciously keep reflecting on him. He'll use whatever means necessary to manipulate us. He'll tell you whatever you want to hear. He'll give you whatever you want. And the truth is, God's lying to you. He's sort of pretending to be this sort of great thing when he's really not. He's just a pretty simple, manipulative idea. And he's been doing it for a long time. Unfortunately, we've all been duped into God's con. Invest in everything we have for nothing. It's not a wager, but a scam, rigged, and it's really sad. So God's a con man, and he did a pretty good job of conning most of the world. The final thing I want to drill, importantly, is that, to be clear, we should not be atheists or agnostics. Again, we should not be atheists or agnostics. God is real. He is. And we must accept and deal with this fact. We can't get around it. God is real. To something we shouldn't ignore. Ignore at your peril. But we shouldn't be theists either. We should not follow God and must escape him in order to grow spiritually. So we shouldn't be theists. We should not follow God. We have to escape God. The exact opposite. We have to escape God. Religion only offers a false spirituality and ultimately stunts our spiritual growth. Religion is a psychic trap. And once you get stuck, there's no getting out. Or at least it's very difficult to get out. It stunts your growth. This may sound very perplexing. That you should neither be an atheist nor a theist. It sounds sort of contradictory, right? But it's not. It's something we should definitely consider. And I hope to give an argument in this video, in this lesson, for this position. If you want to learn more, check out the book Philosophical Mysticism, a Spiritual Handbook for Mankind by Nicholas Schroeder. Definitely worth a read.